Okay, so let's introduce our guest. He is a journalist, a political analyst, and very many things. I'm sure that he'll tell us. David Makali joins us in the Situation Room. Good morning, David.
Good morning.
It's good to have you here, finally. We've been wanting to have you on the show for a while, and you've been wanting to be here also for a while.
Yeah, finally we meet.
Yes. Finally, you're here.
Correct. Yeah.
So, a journalist, you're also a political analyst. What else do you do?
Well, let me say I operate in the political space.
Okay.
I do strategy, I do communications. That is the public side of things. But I have my private end of things. I have interests in entertainment, hospitality, which is something I've done for years. But that is not my public face.
Yeah, that's the private side of David.
That is my business and private side of things, yes.
In this political space, it must be a very busy season for you at this point, and not just now, but over the last, say, very many months. As we look and as we head towards 2022, as political alignments, start taking shape, as conversations take place, as citizens start looking at who they want to elect into leadership. But if you are just to look at the current crop of leaders and you give them a scorecard on various levels over the last 4 years, from national to devolved units, how would you say our political leadership is doing? How is it taking us?
Well, one can say in a nutshell, overall, I think this country is not making much, it's not making many strides in terms of changing the nature, the scope, the profile of our leadership. The things we complained about 10 years ago are still the same things we complain about. So I don't know whether it's because we are not electing a different caliber of leaders or we are naturally pessimists who will never get satisfied with any kind of leadership we elect. Because regardless, even if we elect you, Latif, today as the governor of Nairobi, it will not take you 1 year before you're unpopular with the huge chunks of the populace or the electorate. And I think it's a developmental stage, I would put it that way. We are people with so many needs and wants that nobody elected into public office is likely to assuage or satisfy those needs within the timelines we operate in the electoral cycle. So we'll always have this discontent. I mean, people elect you, within a short time you're unpopular. The person who was before you, they want that person back. So it's a revolving door of politics.
So is our issue then the voter, or is it the leadership?
I think it's both. The voter is, skeptical, disgruntled. The leader is trying to satisfy the needs of the people, which are overwhelming because you never have the capacity to actually deal with these needs immediately. So it is like that. But progressively, we look at the nature of our governance. I don't think we've improved much. I mean, we have legislation. We have tried to implement the legislation. We still have gaps, the same corruption stories, mismanagement of our, institutions is still ongoing. So I don't know whether we're ever going to get out of this trench, so to speak. I'm a pessimist. But I think we have... there is hope, but...
if my history serves me right, there was a time you actually... decided to wade into the waters of politics,
yes,
and present yourself to this motley collection of citizens we call the voter. Okay?
Yes.
You must have had a plan, you must have had an idea, and you must have, at least in your mind, there was something you wanted to do to change this very thing that you're talking about. Correct. And which you've written about and spoken about.
Yeah.
What did you think you were going to do which was different, which would bring a change?
It is just to provide what I would call honest, genuine leadership, principled management of public affairs, which is what lacks across the board. And we advise, we strategize, we talk to these leaders behind the scenes, and I've worked with a broad range of these leaders. In fact, I don't think there's any politician I've not worked with in the political arena over the last 20 years. And you sit in the kitchen, you sit in the strategy rooms, you do all these things. You hope that when they get into office, they're going to actualize some of those aspirations. It never happens.
Why?
I don't know, Bana. You have to help us here. Because
David knows exactly why it doesn't happen.
I think the challenges of office, or being in office, are so enormous. I mean, I have a crop of people we worked with in the civil society for years. The Kibwanas, Rengos. Rengo was always a politician. I mean, there are people who have been in the civil society who have gone into government. We held the same views and aspirations. When they got into government, the achievement was not that great because I think they were overwhelmed by the environment of politics in this country. You say you'll not be corrupt, you're fighting corruption. When you go to seek elective office, it overwhelms you because you're forced to give out money. Because without money, nobody's going to vote for you. So it's a toxic electoral and governance environment that is keeping us locked down. Now,
David,
we need, and when I went in there, I was very forthright. I said, I'm going to write on my ideas, on my my resume as an advocate for good governance or human rights and all these things. I got in there, man. It's a swamp.
So, David, are you saying
I
that
pulled back.
the politics, because look, politics exist everywhere,
Yes.
everywhere.
Yes.
In all countries, in
Yes.
all governments,
Yes.
politics exists. However, there's still folks who get into these positions of leadership, and they're able, even if it is one thing,
Yeah.
they're able to do one thing well,
Yeah.
and you can see the results of that. Would you say here specifically and uniquely? Well, maybe not necessarily uniquely, but specifically, then is politics a hindrance to good governance?
Yes. If politics is about, I mean, I don't want to go to the academic one of who gets what, where, all that. But it is a balance of various interests, the stakes that the public have in your position, if you're a governor, or in the resources which are located to that you manage, and how to divide these resources to apply to the people's needs. Now, that's where the complexity comes, because the demands overwhelm the capacity to serve those needs. And therefore, you find you're compromising here. People want jobs, for example. Some of them don't have qualifications, but they demand jobs from you. You end up being forced to give jobs to people who may not merit, because you have to assuage certain considerations, ethnic, regional, and all these things. And so everyone is pulling at this small cake, and you end up with, you have to be Solomonic to decide how will you satisfy everybody and yet remain on the straight path of being incorruptible,
Because if you're
being
not
fair, being
assuaged,
just.
because if you're not assuaged, then you commit political suicide.
Yeah, because if you don't do those things,
Yeah.
your tenure will be very short. That's why people are always getting in and out. Then they try somebody else, they find this one is worse than the one we had.
Yes,
let's
let's
bring
bring
back.
back.
And you are seeing so many people who lost in the last races coming back to take power in these elections because people don't know what they want. If they decided this is what we want a leader who is not corrupt, who focuses on the public needs and and serves them well and manages our resources properly, you will not survive long. A few will survive. I'm not saying it's a zero-sum game, but there will be a few who will survive, but majority will suffer the consequences of this kind of
David,
leadership.
I am of the view that people actually know exactly what they want. They do.
Yeah.
But I'm also of the view that our political system is more a test of character, a test of who the person actually is. Because people say they want to be involved in active politics.
Yeah.
Then you're presented with what it actually is.
Yes.
Now,
Do you go in or not?
precisely now.
Yes.
There are those who say, I understand, I know myself, I can't be involved in this. You step back. It's a step. There are those who get in and get swallowed up. There are a few who get in there and don't get swallowed up, and it's a constant battle. A few know how to play the games, understand the rules by which this particular game is played, and they actually survive and even get to do a few things. But the problem is they're not many.
Yeah, and if you look at them closely, they are breaking some of their principles, the things they believed in, about governance and so forth. I mean, very few governors or MPs will escape the charges of corruption or involvement in, embezzlement of funds or really underhand deals, because the electorate, as I've said, have these expectations on their leaders, which are not consistent with good
Capacity.
governance and democracy. So you end up being forced to do things which are against even your conscience or your own beliefs
David,
to survive.
You know why I differ?
Now, that's why if you
Yes.
don't want to do those things, Stay out of politics.
Let me tell you why I differ with you on that particular issue. Differ on just that little point. Everything else I agree with you.
Yeah.
You see, what then is leadership if you believe that the way to do things is to succumb to the whims of the people? You may know what people want,
Yes.
but must you do it the way they wanted to achieve what you know very well they want?
You may not do so, but I've just said that the caveat to that is that you will not last long. You can go. I have always said the day I get elected, I'm going to do the things I believe in. If I'm going to be a governor, an MP, anything I'm going to be elected to or appointed to, I'll do the right thing. If it means I'll have to serve only one term and go, so be it. That's the decision I made. Those who want to prolong their stay, because you may not achieve some of the things you want to do within that period. So you say, maybe I'll have to, bend here and there so that I can prolong my time in order to get sufficient time to accomplish some of the things I want to do.
Yep.
Because if I'm straight, hard, and fast, strong, I will not survive beyond this period. And that is a compromise you have to make. You have to make that decision. But I always say, well, you don't have to be there for 10 years. You can do 5 years, and we remember you for doing something for 5 years. If you look at this government, for example, there are things which they've made steps forward and then retreated because of pressure or political convenience. Okay, look at what Michuki did during his term in fixing the Matatu situation in the city.
It was a menace.
and country.
Not
a situation, it was a menace.
Yes, it was.
But then the government receded on those steps which they had taken. Look at the chaos that the boda sector has brought. It's public knowledge. It's boda people, they are useful, they work, they do their thing. But there is no adherence to the law, clearly. But do you see, how many boda people, even before this incident happened, had complied with the law? The police will not ask the boda, but they'll stop the guys who are driving vehicles.
Yes.
Is the law being applied across the board? So because they know once they touch that sector, it has political consequences. So these compromises are what bring the country down. If we have an administration that says, we're going to do these things right, take it or leave it. And I've seen this done in other countries. If you go to Rwanda here, there's order on the roads. You don't see policemen chasing people around. Indeed. One cop is standing at a junction, just watching the vehicles. And you can do that without having to deploy so many policemen. And then you just pick the plates and you digitize the traffic system. Those plates are taken to NTSA. Those vehicles are grounded. For 3 months, the vehicle won't be found on the road for breaching traffic rules. So, we're just not up to it.
So
but
is it leadership?
Serious leadership to do it.
Is it leadership or is it the people? Because I'm hearing you saying very many things. There's the demands of the electorate. They elect you and they expect this, and the other. Yeah. And yet you had a conversation with them by the time they were electing you. Yes. You created the impression that you could deliver. Yes. I will deliver.
Yes.
And then the electorate has this, what you said, there's a mismatch of demand versus your capacity to actually meet those demands and deliver.
Yes.
Is the problem then the David Makalis and Eric Latifs who want to seek positions of leadership? Or is it the David Makalis and Eric Latifs who are the voters?
It is the voter. The biggest problem actually is the voter. They push their leaders to do those things. Corruption thrives because the politicians must find resources to sustain their politics. Because the politics the people demand things of you which are not in your JD. Because the roles of an MP are very clear: legislate, oversight, and represent. But you go back home, MPs have to shoulder everything. Now, where do they get the resources to do those things expected of them? Their personal resources, that's not anywhere in the law.
But David...
So they have to be corrupt to look for resources to come and feed or supply the needs.
In order for them to have some
But who
longevity
created the
in
impression that,
for them to be
that the MP had this job to do?
Sorry?
Where did it begin? Where did this impression that MP...
Where was this chicken before it became an egg? Yes.
Also, of course, there are things that the politicians do to endear themselves to the electorate to get elected. And so they should continue with that trajectory when they get elected. So
that's why I talked about character.
It is cycling.
You see, look, you know full well that you may have aspirations as to what you want to do. And then you get the position, you realize what I thought needed to be done to get this is very different from the reality of the situation. Very, very different. Now, do you think it's incumbent upon you to go back and tell the people, folks, when I wanted this job, I said I was going to do this. It can be done. But it can't be done exactly as I told you.
Yes.
I am saying that the economical manner in which we choose to tell the truth,
Yes.
the economical manner in which we choose not to engage the public in telling them, folks, these things, this one can't happen. Not the way you want it. It can happen, but it can happen this way. So do you want us to do it your way? Because in reality, the moment, for instance, even now, when you're not an MP, given what you've done, you know full well what it requires to get these things done. Now, the common mwananchi may not know that. In fact, usually they don't know what it takes.
You don't know what it takes.
I know this because I was discussing the issue of a road with my member of parliament, and he explained to me the processes. He had said, this road, this one.
If you elect me,
No, he was elected. Now that I'm here,
I'll fix it.
in the 2 years,
Small
2 years went by, I asked him, we had a funeral, I asked him, Mheshimiwa,
The road.
this road.
No, now that he lied to get elected.
He did, but what he didn't, when he told me the story,
Yes.
yes, money had been allocated for that road. Tendering had been done. The contractor had been identified. Then somewhere along the line, money got diverted elsewhere, so everything came to a halt. According to what he told me. I believed him because I had some understanding of how these things work. But what he was telling people at the funeral, because somebody shouted and I said,
bara bara.
you will start seeing earth movers here next week. Okay? Now, what am I saying? The test of character is that. Are you willing to say, folks, the situation...
You know,
As we had envisioned.
things have changed a bit. Let's
Yes.
adjust our
Or
expectations.
you don't tell people in public because somebody may stone you, okay? But before you get there, these opinion leaders in the community, we all know them, the rabble rousers. Tell them, guys, this thing is not going to work this way. The reason why it's not going to work is because of A, B, C, D. What am I saying? I'm saying there are conversations that can be had which will introduce our people to the truth.
Yeah.
But the magic thinking of, I, the Mheshimiwa, will do this, it's the politicians who encourage it. You can have an honest conversation with your MCAs who talk to the people directly. You can have an honest conversation with leaders, but we don't. You still want to have this conversation of, I am going to do this and it can be done. In fact, so-and-so hasn't done it because he's useless. My MP also
The
told me-
assumption here,
Yes,
City,
yes.
is you're assuming that just because you've come and told people the truth, they will then look at you and say, this is a very honest man. Actually, let's just
No.
listen to him.
Actually, it doesn't matter what they think. Let me explain to you why I'm saying this. The question, that's why I asked the question, is it a question of leadership? Is it a question of following? When you succumb to the whims of the people in its naked form, you are no longer a leader, you are a follower. A leader ought to be able to put their foot down in a certain position and say, folks, you're not going to like what I'm about to tell you,
But this is the reality.
but actually, this is what it is.
You'll be out
Precisely.
5 years.
Precisely. They can even try and impeach you if they want. The reason why people go in and then go out is because people think this guy is useless, he's not helping us. Then they bring somebody else. Whoa, wait, the definition of uselessness had not been. Yeah, now this is the guy who is genuinely useless.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, well, the truth of the matter is that a lot of civic education needs to be done in this country to align aspirations of the people and the performance or the job descriptions of the people they elect, so that we know we're electing you to go and do this. And I think that MPs or any elected leaders should have these conversations after they get elected, so that we can bring the reality down to the people and tell them, look, this is my job. This is what you've elected me to go and do. These are your expectations. But they are not expectations of me. It is your expectations. We can work together to achieve those. But assess me on the basis of the performance of my job description, which is A, B, C, D. But, you know, people are not there. Because, as I said, poverty and rampant desperation and all this means people push needs on anyone else. You know, your relatives will push things on you because you're successful in that community. You know, and they think you are obliged to help them. So we have to try and educate the public gradually that, you know, the government does this for you. This is your business to handle.
But even now, you're not a representative as in the elected variety of a leader, but you are a leader. People will still come to you for help.
You see?
Yes.
And they'll come to you in large numbers.
African socialism.
Yes, like you who made the mistake of even telling them you want to be elected.
Yes.
As far as they're concerned, we're ni mheshimiwa. Now, because right now you haven't thrown your hat in the ring, you have an opportunity to speak your truth as you see fit. Because the salient exchanges, I will tell you what you want to hear, and you in turn will promise me that you will actually elect me. But
Yeah,
if
but
I,
you know, people when you tell people the truth, they dislike you. That's the unfortunate part.
Yeah.
I mean, they say, Bana Omwami, you know, even they say when you want you're seducing a girl, you lie to her.
Yeah.
I mean, that has become practice. I mean, I'm
Yes.
not saying anything demeaning of ladies, but that is...
it's not demeaning.
It's expected.
People say that you have to tell her you'll build her...
You have to lie.
You know, a story building, you'll buy her Mercedes, Marcelina, you know.
I will catch a grenade.
And then when she comes home,
Bas.
you know, actually, you know, this is how it
The
is.
chicken is already in the
Yeah,
cage.
yeah, you are locked.
Let's take a break. 29 minutes to 9, Kenya's biggest conversation. We are discussing in this hour the politics, Kenya's politics of deceit, dishonesty. Where does it stem from? Is it from our leaders? Is it from our electorate? Is it all of us as a society? Is that where we have reached? And this is what we're having a conversation with David Makali, journalist and also political analyst. We'll be back shortly on KTN Home, SpiceFM, and online.
This is the Situation Room.
David Makali, journalist and political analyst. We're talking about Kenya's brand of politics, deceit, dishonesty, backstabbing, betrayals, and all manner of things. David says, in his calculation, we haven't really moved much in terms of developing our style of leadership and entrenching good governance and leadership. And this is something that you speak of it as if you're really kind of frustrated. You're like, okay, where we are or where we ought to be.
It is because we all aspire to have our country's politics develop to the level that we see in the West. All of us cite America, the European countries, where people contest elections on issues and they are re-elected on the basis of the performance, appraisal of how they performed. That is hardly the case here. And we have said we are third world, so our politics is also third world politics because of the poverty, of the unemployment, the issues which drag us down, because the voter has been stripped of their dignity, you know. So they are easily manipulable, they can be influenced by small tokens, bribed to vote. Secondly, there is no ideology in our politics. So we are just, I mean, if you look at all these politicians, the difference is in the promises they're making, or the political parties. But if you look at the foundational ideology or philosophies, nothing. Everyone claims the socialism, you know, the social democracy. I mean, it's neither here nor there. There's no distinction. And because of that, the leadership and our politics is all about satisfying our immediate needs. And they're so immense that you are not able to do so in any one electoral or tenure term. So we end up in a frustrated, vicious cycle trying to fix things, but we don't have the tools to fix. Because until we can satisfy the basic needs of people, the determining factor in our politics is going to be the stomach. Basic welfare things. And so we'll go around. Whoever offers me better is where I go. And because people are vulnerable, politicians always offer them better. So you look at the promises being made right now. Principally, one, Baba is offering 6,000 on the table as a meal for families without income employment. 100 billion from Hustler.
For the youth.
Mama mboga na hawa vijana kuwapatia ajira. Now, if you begin examining those and with the immediacy with which these things are being promised, Hustler is reckoning these things mwaka huu tutaweka bilioni 100. And then you look at the practicality of it. By December, I mean, we're having elections in August, September, cabinet is formed, maybe first sitting of parliament,
And that
we are
budget,
into the next year.
That budget will have been passed by June.
Budget will be passed next month.
Yep.
So what it means is that he'll bring a supplementary budget to basically quash what will have been arrived at or passed in this coming budget by June. So we are going to budget for things which, when we elect a new government, they'll be swung off completely the table, new priorities brought on the table based on the promises of the manifesto of either Azimio or Kenya Kwanza. So you look at how our politics is turbulent and our governance is in shreds. Yet all these things are supposed to be based on long-term what are they called? National development goals, the Vision 2030. Now, if you ask them, they say all these things are found within the Vision 2030, mid-term, long-term, and Vision 2030 is about to expire shortly.
Health,
But what are the priorities? If you look at the Big Four agenda, they all fit within the Vision 2030. But were those the immediate priorities to lift us out of our poverty and underdevelopment? Because they're based on the promises. We promise people so we can get their support.
Right.
That's where the deceit comes in. Some of those things are not practical, nor are they immediate. But once you get in, then you now begin to fix how you can govern.
But David, I'm listening to your argument. You know what I'm thinking? How different then is a politician from the electorate? Because if I look at our parliament or our politicians, they are also lured by small little tokens here and there. Either to pass this bill or not to pass this bill, or to delay this, or to ignore this, or to do the other. And the same thing we're saying. We, the voter, are also pleased by small little tokens. So we are
Correct.
not dissimilar from our politicians.
So, I mean,
They're a
if
reflection of us.
Sure, but David, then it's the same symptoms then that plague the electorate as well as those who are seeking positions of leadership. Many would argue that it is not possible for you to have mature governance without economic development. That you cannot do it unless your people have been sustained, unless your people then have everything that they need on a daily basis. There is no way you can then invite political maturity. You cannot have good governance and leadership without economic development.
Totally agree with you. In fact, in this should be an issue of scholarship, that in academia and so forth, what are the prerequisites for successful democracy? You cannot have successful democracy in the manner it's described and known and taught with our existing environments, where people have such needs and diverse factors such as ethnicity, underdevelopment, poverty levels, or education, differences and so forth. A society must reach a certain level where the basic needs have been catered for to apply the concepts of democracy the way they are defined in the West and which we are trying to copy. So we practice some form of democracy, but it is variations. I mean, as
I'm going back to my subject of character. You see, is it that the political class and the nature of our politics, does it corrupt individuals to the point where they are almost indistinguishable from the people we knew before they entered politics to the people they now are and they're elected? Or are we seeing what this person was all along? It's just that the opportunity to see the worst of them had not been presented to us.
No, I'm tempted to think that politics brings out the worst in people. Even good people are influenced by politics to do things that they would not ordinarily not do because of the pressures to deliver, to honor some of the expectations from your electorate, the people who elected you, expecting that their lives are going to change immediately.
David, where's the pressure? To meet the needs of your electorate, or to now subscribe to this lofty position and everything that goes with it that you have now acquired.
That is part of meeting the needs, CT.
You also have needs as a politician to belong to the high society.
To live up to the expectations.
Look, somebody who, if you just go to any part of this country and ask them, who's your MP? All right? They take pride if their MP is one of those people that you see on TV all the time. If it's one of those MPs who has not been seen, MP, so to belong is part of meeting the needs. Go out there so you can be seen and so you can be saying that Makali is our MP. It's our MP. It's part of it. And then the other part of it is once you get into that club, the goodies that come with being in part of that club, you're able then to take to your people.
And how does it help?
Yes.
What takes priority? Maintaining this particular image, let's call it lifestyle, that you feel you're accustomed to and which you feel is your right, or meeting the needs of the people. If that were the case, why are the complaints so varied and so far and so wide about MPs who are never seen? You are elected, then zzz.
Because you have to escape the pressure sometimes. A lot of unajua kukua
Makali,
kwa
how then do you
unajua
explain
kukua
those
kwa
who
ground.
are home almost every weekend or every other weekend? How do you explain those ones then? 'Cause
Those
the
are the
people-
ones I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Those are the ones who've been able to enter into that club,
Yes.
so that then they can maintain that lifestyle. If Abuja tell us, kukua kwa ground, what does that mean? Kuonekana kwa ground.
My friend, first you need to have capacity to be on the ground. That capacity is found in the wallet. Because
I believe buoyant.
as an MP, on a regular weekend, you need about 100,000 shillings to be on the ground. Because you go home and all these people swarm into your home, you have Arambes to attend, needs to cater for funerals and so on, fees to pay. These things are not anywhere in your pay slip listed. This is for salary, this is your own income for family, this one is for a village, and this one is... It is not there. But you have to serve them. So that means you have to look for means to sustain those demands. And that means you have to be crafty. So this thing is, is a vicious cycle. Politicians have to find money, make the money if they don't have. Because they cannot always have that money from the business or their occupations. So we have to cure the poverty and the demands from the people.
And I think because you're essentially asking for a destruction of that structure, whereby the people are expecting the leader to do 1, 2, 3, and also there's the expectation. So in order to destroy that, you have to make sure that your people, in terms of their basic needs, have been met.
Yes.
And without that, you can't have all these other things that we're talking about. Many would say that whatever this is that we are trying to craft on this side of the pond is still immature and that we need time. We've talked about the Western democracies having had 200 years to be able to figure out what they were doing before times of the Industrial Revolution came, and then there was money in the hands of people. Do we see that now, that we still need time? We still need time to sort it out? I mean, how much time
I don't
is
think it's
there?
time we need. It is the right ideas implemented. There was a time when, for example, SACCOs, cooperative societies, chamas and all this, social infrastructure that we have set up to accommodate our diverse needs. Those safety nets need to be strengthened by policy so that people in villages, for example, can be, organized in a manner that some of those basic needs which are being pushed to MPs are actually taken care of, either through devolved government or through national government programs. That's why there's those Kazi kwa Vijana and all these things. They're supposed to address, those are the interventions to make sure that people are self-sufficient or they earn an honest living, not out of the pockets of the elected leaders.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if we can deploy more funds, perhaps that's where, this bottoms-up thing might find relevance. How do you empower these groups at the bottom so that they are not putting pressure on the people, on the elected leaders?
So that they can actually do their job.
To feed them. So they have occupation, they have sources of income that are actually structured and in place.
But David,
as part of our governance structures or economic arrangements.
If you look at the county system, it is a bottoms-up. In structure, in nature, and intent. Because the very thinking behind it was precisely that. Remove all these things, at least as many as you possibly can, with time reduce it more and more from the national government and take it to a government that is nearer to the people. So in essence, we already have such a system. Now, whether
Are they
it is
working?
now, I thank you for asking that question, because it brings to the fore what I wanted to ask. You see, there are things we say, and in essence, they're supposed to be an explanation for a situation, but sometimes they seem to me more like a justification. You mentioned the word lie, and I would say that's where the lie comes into the politics. You have a reason to explain a situation, and then you make it the truth. And I'm asking, is it really so? Because when you look at the West and the way they go about their politics, the assumption is that, yes, and the assumption is correct in that the Mwananchi has basic needs met. By and large, it is met. But there is this understanding that when you're a politician, when you're in politics, the foundational blocks of it must be treachery, it must be lies, and it's acceptable. Now, it's acceptable if you're in politics for these things to happen. When you look at, say, Brexit, let's look at the UK.
Yes.
Let's look at Brexit. Before, the Prime Minister and his best friend and chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, fell out. And one started talking about this and one started talking about the other. It hit the headlines for a very long time. Now, if you look at some of the conversations they were having, and you strip it to the bare, it boils down to these people were lying to the public. That's what it boils down to. Even if you look at the advertisements, for instance, about Brexit, you know what they were saying? But are you aware that Britain is sending to the EU 350 million pounds every week? Now, it was said, it was even in buses, it was an advertisement, and people say it every day. It wasn't true. But do you think people cared? Cummings, who was the chief advisor at that particular point to the Prime Minister, would support this issue on his Twitter. Yes. They eventually got what they wanted. Okay? Now, I'm giving this as an example to say this, that when you look at our politics, what we're discussing here is what we call priming. Before the event and before what you want to do, you give people, you give them a position.
Yes.
And say, unajua hii kitu vile iko, or the language, vile inakuaga.
Begin orienting them.
Yes, towards what's coming.
Yes.
And you say it long enough, people begin to say, yeah, this is the reason why this happens. Then, framework. You give it a framework within which you're going to do it. And that's where all these little stories about, I will give 100 million, 100 billion, I will give, that's where it comes in now. You're now giving flesh to this particular. And then, when you've set the agenda now, vizuri, okay? You now, the person who's standing, you're the person who can deliver all these things.
Yes.
But the truth of the matter is, you can't. The role of government across the world is to do precisely all these things that you're talking about. The lie is, it is you. Now, do you hear politicians coming out and say, actually, folks, let me explain to you how government works? No, it is me. Now, big lie.
Yes. That's where it starts. So our civic education is important. So that the public also understands the expectations must be realistic, not put things on people.
Who's to conduct that civic education?
Government. You know.
Who's government?
Government. Government at both levels. You know, our government has been restructured by the Constitution very well. Now, we need a revolutionary leader to take charge of government. You know the way Museveni reorganized Ugandan society, completely with the national resistance movement, up to resistance councils, up to the village councils.
Yes.
Our constitution also makes a provision for all these things, Paka village administrators and all these things. This government, now that structure needs to be given substance in terms of organizing, staffing it, and operationalizing it. So that the money then begins to go to those levels to arrest the situations which are overwhelming government. As you know, the way the matatu sector was reorganized, for example, every matatu must belong to a SACCO.
Yes.
Imagine if you structured society like that and said everybody must belong to a youth group. If you are up to 18 years, you must belong to a youth group. Those youth groups are funded in the villages, either through the national government or the county governments. Funds are going directly there to fund activities which generate income and give them jobs.
In that community.
So you begin to arrest some of the, and then leaders are at the head of these things so that they don't have to shoulder these responsibilities financially because they say the money has been channeled here to take care of your needs. Jisot kutoka hapo. Don't come to me when you have funerals. Don't come to me when you have no school fees.
But that means,
Jisot kutoka hapo.
That means
these
somebody is
bursary
losing
things
power.
are being put here and there, but it's helter-skelter.
Somebody is losing power when that happens.
I know.
And that's what they want to cling on to.
Well, here we
and
are,
that's
we're
the
looking
problem.
at it's still the chicken and egg situation. But if I look, because you say, okay, then whose responsibility is it to teach? Whose responsibility is it to learn? And then you pass on this information. However, it would be interesting to hear the only time, take your pick, that we have seen things started to build up is when they reached ground zero. Pick any country.
Yes.
China, the United States, anywhere in Europe. When things hit rock bottom, when there was no option
Nowhere to
but to build up is when you started to see progress. Here we are dancing about with these options here, politician will be able to, no. And I've always, until you have a disruption,
Yes.
That
Or
is the only-
status quo properly.
zero. That is the only time we'll be able to see these things built up. Otherwise, we're just here talking, being romanticizing about things here until you get to the point where you have no option but to do it right. We will not see progress.
It takes leadership also to marshal such discontent and that situation to funnel that energy into a movement then that reorganizes society and gives it a new leap. In this country, there are not many forces around which people can congregate to cause revolutionary change or major leadership shifts. I mean, it used to be Baba. Now Baba is in a situation here.
Situation shift.
Yeah, in a situation.
Is it a situation or is it an arrangement?
Yeah, in some, and then now then Hustler has come around. He's captured the imagination of a certain cluster of Kenyans that are suffering or that have identification or alienation.
He's in an empowerment narrative, and a very effective empowerment narrative.
Yes, and he has a good message that really resonates well with that constituency. But can he marshal sufficient number to take leadership of this group and deliver them to where they need to go? That is a different story.
David, am I hearing
That's a
you
different
in
story.
very many ways going around saying, maybe we need a benevolent dictator?
You can say yes. It's really okay.
Actually,
Kwa kusema ukweli,
kusema tu kweli, we need a firm hand in this country. Because there's so much disorder. There's lack of discipline. Going back to what J.B.
Discipline.
Muturi used to say.
Discipline.
There is indiscipline in this country. There is lack of order within systems, and performance is falling short. We have the infrastructure. We have the laws. Implementation is the problem. So you need a firm hand, somebody who's on top of the situation to fix things. But there must be breathing spaces, institutions which allow people to express themselves and to contribute and to participate in such government. That we must guard at all times. We don't want any choking dictatorship. No, and anyone who demonstrates such a tendency should be shunned and ejected from our system.
Maybe for us to get to that point, you first need to have a choking kind of system, get things in line, and then now allow the breathing spaces to come in. Because you'll be competing. You come in today, David, you want to be a firm hand, and then you have all these civil societies, very vibrant. You've got all these
Jumping about
constitutional
with their
commissions.
opinion.
You've got, I don't know
No,
who
no,
asking you, telling you
I
to
don't
do-
agree,
I
Latif.
want to do
You
this.
must always have a breather. I mean, even a tank, man, has maji kijaa, there is
kuna mahali
kuna mahali
inatiririka.
inatiririka bana.
Yes.
Ukifunga sana, people will choke, and it will be a full-time dictatorship, and everybody, power is power can be abused. Absolute power is even more abused. So we must always check that. But we need a firm hand, a leader who is hands-on, and who has no compromises, who has no baggage, who can not say, this is my friend, this is my community, this is my region. You crack down on people, the law is implemented.
Which I feel
Fair
that
and
that's
square.
part of our problem,
Yeah.
is every leader that we have has some baggage.
Yeah.
They are beholden. They owe somebody something. They are
That's-
there
that's the
because,
problem.
like now, the way we are saying, you cannot form a government without a coalition. What does that mean? It means that you're not independent.
Yeah.
You get in there, and everybody will be telling, wewe, unajua kura zetu ndio zilikuwa.
But that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
So you can't be a firm hand.
No, you can, but it's a good thing. You know why I'm saying it's a good thing? The process of understanding how to work with people is that process of understanding that you cannot have absolute power. Where we've had even absolutism,
Yeah.
look at, I give the example of ANC in South Africa. Those guys had the majority. They were a dictatorship of sorts.
Yeah.
They could just pass laws as they saw fit. And the outcome of that was, when you have a vibrant opposition of people who force you to pause, it is good for you. It is good for the government.
Vibrant
It is good for the
opposition.
people. It is good.
But vibrant opposition is not a coalition.
No. A coalition, in essence, is...
A coalition is a gathering
Yes,
of interests
It is a gathering of interests, and within it...
that
is
may have
em-
nothing to
is-
do with the public.
They don't
it is
allow you to
embedded in
move.
diversity. You know, I'm saying this. The example I've seen in Kenya was that Nusumkati of Kibaki's and Raila's.
Yes.
That was first-hand seeing. Those guys were a check and balance unto themselves.
None of them could be a firm hand.
Actually, they could.
There was corruption during that time,
Man,
and
it-
nobody
yeah.
could talk about it.
It was
Why?
crazy.
Because you talk about it, will expose you.
The point is, there are many things that would not have happened if they were not a check and balance. The corruption we're saying, in my opinion, could have been worse. If there was one party that knew it didn't matter what the opposition did, they could just do what they saw fit.
But, okay, there were advantages to that grand coalition, but also disadvantages. Some things were obstructed merely because they don't favor us.
But
Not
that's part of
necessarily
our,
because they were
but David,
good
that's
for the
part of
people.
our growth.
Yeah.
You see, everything that we're dealing and we're talking about here in the Kenyan setup is an experiment. Trying to find out this democracy, what aspect of it fits and suits us
But at
better.
some point, something's got to pass the acid test, CT. You can't be
Yeah.
experimenting
And,
until
and what is the asset test?
to move.
Okay,
in
but, but are we not moving?
Let me tell you,
Are we not moving?
In fact, we have regressed in our politics. We had political parties and we had opposition and all these things, and those were sufficient checks and balances. Now we've come to this thing. There's a mongoloid that they tried to create under BBI. I'm happy it didn't succeed.
Wait.
But this thing of everybody wins. I mean, I didn't know what it meant
David.
in practical terms.
Thursday is coming.
Yeah,
Don't speak too soon.
I am optimistic that we will hold ground. We being the
We've come to the top of the hour. Thank you very much, David, for joining us. See, it's been nice. You'll
Nice,
come
man.
again.
See, it's nice being here, man.
Good.
When you guys do this every morning and you don't invite us.
We do this every morning and you've been avoiding us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for watching the conversation on TV. The conversations continue on SpiceFM around the country and SpiceFM KE on YouTube and Facebook. David Makali has been our guest. Good morning.